Hi, I'm Seth Mosley, and we are here on the Full Circle Music Show live from Music Makers Bootcamp with a live studio audience. We wanted to do this panel with a couple friends of mine, three friends of mine, who each are in an A&R role in the industry in some shape or form. James Rueger is A&R at Fairtrade Records, has worked on, I'm going to not even go with the credits because each of these guys' credits list is so long that you just need to Google it as far as the records that they've worked on. Jon Mays is now head of A&R at Centricity Music and was formerly at Word and a lot of other places, and Sparrow. And then over on the end, another Ohioan. I don't know if you guys are, where's the Ohio crew? The Ohio crew's kind of spread around now. OH. I still don't feel that confident saying that after the other day, but
yeah, that's true.
It's pretty brutal.
Rough game.
But Josh Bailey is head of A&R and publishing now at Word Entertainment. So what I wanted to start with is literally I'm going to go through just a few questions and then we're going to open it up for you guys. And we've got this mic that you can walk up to and you're going to be able to ask your own questions for them to answer. First off, I'd love to just kind of hear each of your stories of how did you get to where you are? How did you move to Nashville? How did you get into the music business? We can go, whoever wants to go first. It's informal. Start with the guy on the left. So we'll start with Josh Bailey.
I see how it works. Well, hello. Thank you for having me. Where did I start? Well, I've been in town since 2004. As Seth said, I'm from the great state of Ohio. I finished my degree in nothing to do with music in 2004, and then moved down here quickly after that. I was going to go to law school and pursue constitutional law and decided that I wasn't cut out for that. So I decided to come down here. Music played obviously an integral role in my life growing up and just loved everything about it. But really, honestly, I have no education in it. I barely played anything. I kind of played things along the years in my developmental years, but I really didn't play much. And but knew that music was my calling and felt like I should come down here to Nashville. I didn't want to go to LA or New York, so came down here. My first job here was waiting tables, like most people. And then within a couple of months, I got a job with a guy named Tom Jackson. I don't know if any of you know Tom or not, but just love him to death, dear friend. He's crazy, but he's a live show producer. So I worked for Tom for about 6 months. And then I got to know a couple named Rod and Susan Riley, which they owned a little independent record label at the time that was through Sony. And Rod and Susan, for some reason, took pity on me and offered me a job to help them. They were in the process of selling the record label. And so I got a job kind of doing odds and ends stuff with them. And then they sold their company to Word and Warner Music Group, and I came over in the sale of that. And it was then a journey of trying to figure out where do I belong at the label. So I quickly found myself being asked if I wanted to help out in A&R. So I tell people all the time I fell into A&R. I didn't even know what it even stood for. I kind of fell into the role and just kind of had a knack for it and finding talent and very relational. So just I love that part of it. I love helping people and helping artists, and it's just been really a thrill over the last 12, 13 years being able to be a part of what God has me doing. So yeah, that's my short little story.
Yeah, it's awesome. I grew up in a little West Texas town called A&Rs in a Pentecostal church of about 60 people. And I was the only one that could really play anything in the whole congregation. So I was the music kid. And so grateful today for that upbringing and the way that little church encouraged me musically. Didn't go to college, graduated high school, and some guys I knew from East Texas and I started a band, worst band in music history. And I'm not kidding. And had 3 years there living in Nacogdoches, Texas, if anybody knows their Texas cities. That band opened for a band that was from here in Nashville, and their bass player was leaving. They said, hey, we're auditioning bass players if you want to come. It'd been about 3 years, and I was kind of like, I'm tired of going hungry. My dad worked in the oil field, and he could always get me a job, and I knew that. So I thought, well, that's a neat end to this chapter. I'll go do that audition. I can say I went to Nashville and had, a professional audition, and that'll be neat. Plus, the lead singer of that band was a girl that was the hottest girl I'd ever seen. And I thought maybe I'll see her again if I go do this audition. That was in the fall of '76. If you haven't been able to tell, I'm considerably older than these other people. I got here, I got the job, and I married the girl 1 year later. That was 42 years ago. No, 40 years. This year is our 40th anniversary.
Yeah.
So that was life-changing, obviously, for me, but that's what got me to town. I played in different bands around town for a while. That eventually led to about a 5-year season of just studio work, where I only played on recordings, and I did some indie music production and some songwriting during that time. I worked a lot for a guy that probably no one's heard of in here named Neil Joseph, who was producing a ton of 80s CCM stuff that I was playing on. And he and I had developed a closer relationship, and I was I don't know if this is still even a term, but session leader, where I wrote the charts and contracted the players and that kind of thing for him. So we were closer than just a producer and musician, but he took me to breakfast one morning, and this is where I'll reinforce what Josh just said about backing into things. We're at this breakfast, and he says, well, I'm taking a job. I'm not going to be producing much anymore. Word Records was in Waco still at that time, and they were moving their label office to Nashville, and they had hired Neil to run it for them. So I'm taking this job, but I'm going to need to hire an A&R person, and I think you'd be good at it. And I said, what is that? So there is some theme here and message that a lot of you will experience that's, God is so sovereign over all this stuff. Some of these things, they just come to you. You do work hard for things, but also there's an old mentor of mine told me a long time ago, you live on the line of preparation until it intersects the line of opportunity. And that intersection happened for me at that breakfast, He explained it to me. I'd never had a real job. I was in my late 20s at this point, and it would be, regular hours and a desk and an office and corporate environment and that kind of stuff. But we just had our first child, and I didn't know if I'd be playing bass when I was 40, probably not. Who wants a 40-year-old bass player? But I took the job, and so that began an 8-year career at Word, and went from there to Sparrow. I was there 3 years. The band that I came to town to play for was recording for a label called Benson at that time, and I got an offer to come lead Benson Records. That went up to about 2000 when Napster changed the entire music industry and Benson got shut down. And that's about the time we started conversations about Centricity and what it could be, might be, should be. Is it crazy to try to do something in this environment? So that's where I am now. We celebrated our 10th year officially last year. It's hard to tell that long of a story in a short time.
Yeah. Pretty good job. So that was Jon Mays. James Rueger.
So I'm from Evansville, Indiana, if anyone knows where that is. Interesting fact about Evansville, Indiana, if you read the book Outliers, it talks about hotbeds, and in Evansville was a hotbed for theater, musical theater. It was very well funded, $100,000 musicals over the summer, and just really a hotbed of resources for musical theater. And a lot of people from Evansville went on to do theater in New York and in other cities, and that was kind of my thing. And didn't grow up in the church. And a girlfriend in high school said, you should check out Belmont. And that was just a whim. And I came to Belmont. I thought I was going to go to Indiana University, and went to Belmont and felt like that was where I was supposed to go. And no scholarship, no nothing. And thought, man, this music business program, this school, this environment, this is where I want to be. And so I went and came to faith fall of my freshman year at Belmont, and A couple years later, went to a Sonic Praise. If you know the band Sonic Flood, went to a Sonic Praise event, a municipal auditorium, kind of where they do the monster truck rallies.
Yeah, kind of the same thing.
And it's kind of the same thing. And I'd never been in an environment, weirdly enough, I'd never been in an environment where I saw people worshiping like that. And they were just raising their hands, and it wasn't about the performances. It wasn't about the lights and the sound. It was about God and these people worshiping God. And I know where I was. I know what seat I was in. And that moment marked me. I knew that was what I wanted to be a part of from that moment on. I've never looked back, and I had no idea how to get into the business. I didn't know Christian music at all. I knew Place in This World, Michael W. Smith. I knew Flood, and I knew Jesus Freak. And I was like, those are kind of all rip-offs of these secular songs, but it's another story. And so anyways, I conned my way into a job with a guy named Marty Wheeler at a publishing company called Brentwood Benson Music Publishing, and I did archive coordination for my first role in the music industry, gloriously titled Archive Coordinator, realistically tape copy. And my job was to copy a catalog of songs, 50,000+ songs. At the time, it was one of the largest privately owned music catalogs in the world. Started in 1906. And so my whole job all day long was to archive these songs, from LPs to DATs. I don't even know if anyone knows what a DAT is, but that was my job. And then I went from DAT to CD. The interesting thing from DAT to CD is you have to do it real time, so you make sure you stop at the end of every song so it'll grab a new ID. Because if you don't do that, it could just run on for 5 or 6 songs, and then you have to redo it. And the interesting part about that was I got to listen to an entire catalog of music that I had no context of. I learned the Rambos, and I learned Ira Stamphill, and I learned the Cathedrals, and I learned terrible Stephen Kerr Chapman early demos and Michael W. Smith demos. I listened to thousands of songs in 3 years and just got an education. So it was honestly invaluable for me in learning Christian music, not growing up in it. After that, I decided that I wanted to go work for I&O Records at the time. Now it's called Fairtrade. I really loved what a guy named Jeff Mosley, who started the company, was doing. I wanted to work there. And so an opportunity came through a recommendation, and I talked to Jeff for about 6 months, and I thought, it was going to be one of those scenarios where it's like, your gift has arrived, Jeff Mosley, and here I am. And in reality, he was very gracious, and I learned a lot in the first 5 years, and learned how to serve artists, and learned what A&R really is, past the artist and repertoire, what that role actually means. And I've been there 13 years now, and so I love it, love what I get to do, grateful for it, and that's kind of my story.
A very quick summary, what is A&R? What's your 10-second definition of that?
I think there are probably 4 core functions that everyone would agree with this, but everybody does A&R their own way too. But in one respect, you're a talent scout, so you're responsible for the signings for the label. Second, you're responsible for the songs that the artists record. You spend more time on that, I think, than anything else. Third is you oversee the production of the recordings, so you have producers working for you on the budget and the timeline and the musical direction and getting that record made and finished and making it right. And then fourth is the more nebulous thing, but there's some sort of relationship with the artist that you're not the only person at the label in relationship with them, but it kind of started with you, and in some ways you bear the weight of that responsibility. To say keep them happy wouldn't be fair, but you do sort of play roles of pastor, counselor, teacher, friend, father, all kinds of roles like that, as this artist who most of the time are really young when you sign them, grow up and mature and figure out who they are in this world. The ideas of combining, how you make your living with art and with your faith is a messy proposition, and it will change everybody who tries to do it. So you're sort of walking alongside these people as they try to navigate that and be helpful to them in that process. That'd be my 4.
Yeah, that's a pretty good explanation. Anything to add?
Next question. No, I would just add sports metaphors. We can use them all day long, but it's a lot like a coach. You're not on the field. You're not the guy that's running the plays, but you're definitely the guy that's helping keep all the pieces together and keep the ball moving. Sometimes you're micromanaging the process, through co-writes and through timeline and, hey, where are the songs and what are you doing and what do you want to write about? And sometimes you leave it alone because it's working. And, I think being able to see where to touch and where not to touch and when to input and when not to input from a creative level, is a real, I think, necessary part of it. And then obviously the other side, being able to speak to creatives, but also being able to speak to marketing departments and radio departments that are going to take the baton.
The baton, yeah.
Got it. From you once the record's been turned in.
It's always been, even for me, I feel like working with each of you, it is interesting to see how the role of A&R functions at different labels, but it kind of does ultimately wind up being, to me, the relationship manager. You're kind of the one that the artist has to go to. It's also the one that we have to go to as producers or songwriters. So I apologize for that, first of all. The theme of this whole panel is about what do labels look for? And I know that's a ever-changing question. It's probably a little bit of a nebulous question, but it's one that everybody here, I'm sure, is very interested to know. So when you're talking about the first part of your definition of A&R being the talent scout, what is that thing that you guys are specifically looking for in your various companies right now? And especially in how it relates to, streaming is the new norm, touring is the big thing. What is it that you guys look for?
Cash. Next.
I'll jump in. It's always a bit of a moving target, honestly. There's factors that play into it, whether it's what's happening in music, what artists and types of artistry are working and what aren't at the time. Where do you see the future of music going? Different types of music, instrumentation. There's so many things that go into it. But ultimately, for me, I'm looking for something that moves me, that makes me emotionally go somewhere that is unique and different and fresh. I'm looking for that moment, where I run across a voice or a song that feels, unique and moves me emotionally. So it's hard to put your finger on it. It's kind of a gut thing. Sometimes you're right, sometimes you're not. But I want to work with people that stir that emotion, that walk into a room and something's different, something changes. Every artist has something different about them that I think draws you in. I often compare the process to a dating, courting process of, there's something about that person that intrigues you. Then it's a dance a little bit of, does this make sense? So it's a little vague, but at least that's the initial part of it.
It's good.
I think we would agree that it's vague. There's a whole half of it that is this gut thing. How do you describe that? You can't explain what motivates you or moves you with someone. As I try to explain the other half, which is the more practical side, as hard as that is, it's some combination, I think, of talent, of course, that you look for, songwriting, uniqueness, which Josh mentioned. And even that is a qualified kind of uniqueness, like you can't be like everything else, but you need to be a little bit like everything else, in order to just fit. So that's weird. And then the fourth would maybe a work ethic, a high work ethic, like the King and Country guys have almost set a new standard of just guys who bring high vision and work to go along with that. That's inspiring to watch. So, a combination of those four things in whatever makeup in that particular person, and then the whole gut, mysterious, what you feel like God's telling you to do, and that person's story and their uniqueness and what they bring to your label that isn't already there. There's those kinds of things. But it is complex.
Yeah.
It's also a big stewardship, sort of a weight of making those choices for the people who own your label, who write your paychecks. That should feel heavy for all of us in an appropriate way.
I totally agree with all that. I think there's a necessary arrogance to the role that whatever you like, everybody else is going to like. I mean, your gut. And I think you do have to lead with that and be confident in saying, I believe in this, and thus everybody else is going to believe in this too. Because I think the doubting and the questioning and I don't know, is it good? And you asking everybody. I think there's you can kind of exist in this no man's land place where even if other people don't believe in it, if you believe in it and see the potential in it, sometimes you need to go with that. I think a lot about, there's this guy, Ray Kroc, started McDonald's, and he would do lots of interviews, and they would ask him all the time, you're the #1 burger guy, how'd you do that? And he would answer all the time. He'd say, you guys think I'm in the burger business, but I'm really in the land business. I find that really funny because in our business, I think we say it's the songs, and I really think it's the people a lot. I think the artists that last a long time are people that connect with people, and I think ultimately this music thing is about finding someone to go on a journey with as a fan, to adopt them into your life and say, where are you taking me? Taylor Swift and Grateful Dead, and there's lots of examples of that, and I think for me it's being smitten with the person too. Do I believe where this person is going? Do I believe what this person is saying? Do I believe that other people will believe similar things about this artist? And then if you can establish that, ideally, then it is all about the songs and the development. So
Yeah, that's a great answer. So I feel like my perception, at least with the way that social media has kind of tipped the scales on things that are important versus not important, does that play into your perception of an artist at all in terms of if they're coming in having a massive Instagram following or 1 million YouTube subscribers? Does that even play into it, or is it not even matter?
For us, certainly. I think it excites our marketing people more than it does me. Yeah. It does speak to their work ethic usually, and that's important. But it also, there can be another side of the coin, like you've spent that much time on YouTube and your songs are only this good. What are you really valuing? So, but it is for millennials, it's such a cultural message that this is what's required. You've got to get this many likes and this many follows. And I'm old school enough to believe that a song will always trump that. But it does speak to their work ethic, and that's something important. I don't know that whether it's streaming or whatever the next thing will be is as important to us as it is to people who distribute and market.
Yeah, I'm right there with John. I was going to say also at the end of the last question, I feel like it is kind of more of a thing now that a lot of A&R guys are looking at metrics and analytics, especially I think more in our counterparts in New York and LA. There's a lot of guys making decisions on what's going on trend-wise.
Right. I mean, there's websites that are nextbigsound.com and things that are dedicated to just aggregating these metrics of social media.
Yeah. But I'm more in line with where John's at on as far as where we're making decisions.
So I guess the other big question along with it on a nuts and bolts level is where are you finding artists? Are you finding them on YouTube? Are you meeting them at churches? Are you going and seeing live shows?
MySpace. Right?
James, let's go.
Good one. People ask me that all the time, and it's recommendations. It's still the old is still dictating the new. I mean, to even talk about all the social media, it's still nuts and bolts, going out and playing dates and eventually getting ads on radio stations so that all of the socials go up respectively. I mean, that's kind of the thing. But as far as discovering talent, it's, hey, the A&Rs were in a city and they had an opener, and that opener was very good. And they're like, hey, you should talk to that opener. Or a manager will bring stuff in. Or, I think more in the secular world, attorneys kind of lead that process. In our world, it's typically, for me, it's referrals. People that I've worked with before, artists that I've worked with before, managers that I've worked with before, producers that I've worked with before, that bring in artists. That's typically where I intersect new artists.
And people that you trust.
Yeah, sure.
There's a book called The Producer by a guy named John Hammond, who in some ways is kind of the godfather of the A&R process, who was a guy that maybe was the first guy, I think, that would go into clubs and he'd hear Billie Holiday and he would just light up and then start to say, well, out of all these songs in your set, let's record these 10. That's the R part, the repertoire part. And then other labels started saying, he worked for Columbia, and other labels started saying, well, we need our own John Hammond to go do that. And that was a core piece of that's where Talent Scout kind of came from, that you went out and found things in clubs. Yeah. I think there was an earlier day for me, I don't know about you guys, where you were in churches a lot, going to see people. But I don't know, if the network just got bigger, technology did change things, obviously the internet, but I don't do nearly as much of that. It just seems like it comes to us. Nancy, our intern, is here. Wave, Nancy. And another guy in our company, the guy who works with me in A&R, Matt, will spend more time surfing. And Nancy's brought things in before to our A&R meetings that she's found or knows from school or things like that. But
like cat videos.
Cat videos, yeah. We do spend too much time looking at cat kinds of videos. But 90% of it, at least, has got to be just people emailing you and saying, you got to check this out.
Have you ever signed I found this guy somewhere and carried it through and done it?
Like a homeless guy?
No, just, not off of a recommendation. Or a homeless guy, either one.
Yeah. Not that I can think of.
Yeah. I haven't either.
Yeah.
So never sign an artist that wasn't off a recommendation.
I'd have to think. It's been a lot of years for me.
I'm pretty positive I haven't.
You almost always at least connect with them through somebody.
Relationship.
Yeah.
Wow. That makes a big statement. So what is the importance for you, you're working with artists that live in Nashville and outside of Nashville. What would you say the importance is for somebody wanting to get into the industry, wanting to connect with the label? What's the importance of being in a city like Nashville?
Just artist-wise, producer-wise, all the above?
All the above. Maybe you could speak to each of them.
Sure. I have a bias and preference for it. I would say probably half of the artists that we work with probably live here. Maybe a little bit more than that. Just depends. And then I would say, majority of the folks that we work with just creatively, songwriters and producers and engineers and all that kind of stuff work here. But I like the idea of going outside of Nashville sometimes too, and finding some different pockets of culture and thoughts and ideas that are outside of Nashville. So, it's sometimes more cost effective and easier because you're in front of people and you can connect with them easier sometimes. But for me, it doesn't play a huge role other than probably in the songwriting process. If they're not here, it's a little harder to have a little more consistency in songwriting and meeting and developing and talking through stuff. It's so much easier for that human interaction if they're here, and those times are usually more fruitful than a phone call or a email. So I think relationally it's still most beneficial when they're here. But So
for somebody wanting to be where you guys are, is it a necessity? Wanting to work maybe in a behind-the-scenes role in the industry, like whether it's a label or PR, marketing, anything that's not the artist or the creator.
I think so. Yeah. Well, for an artist or a coworker, I think this would be true. Josh used that analogy. We do a lot of dating, especially on an artist side. Who the person is so important, right? And it works both ways. They really need to know who you are. And to carry the analogy too far, you're wondering, are we going to get married? Because getting married, a la signing someone, is a serious commitment for the label in terms of what they're going to invest, and for the artist and how long and what the expectation is. It's serious. So you don't want to do that with people you don't trust. Character only reveals itself over time. So if somebody lives in Indiana, it's just harder to date them, right? You can Skype all you want.
Because they're from Indiana.
Well, yeah, who wants to date anyone from Indiana? You can Skype and call and all that, but you don't really build a relationship that way. So I would say the same thing kind of is true for coworkers, maybe not to the same extent, but you need to know and trust the people that you're hiring. And I don't want to hire anyone that I've only done an interview with over Skype or something. I want to get to know them. So I'm bigger on this than I've ever been, that living here is a big deal. For all the reasons Josh said, for what I've just said. I used to say, don't move to Nashville because it just kind of makes you one of everybody that's living in Nashville. But it's just too hard to try to do it. We all do. We all have. But it's just so much harder.
Sure. So I'll ask one more question and then we'll open it up to our amazing audience because I'm sure you guys are like bursting forth with questions for these guys. So you guys are, in a sense, mentors to your artists and the people that are working around you. And you touched a little bit on this, but was there a mentor for each one of you that played a role along the way that changed your life? And if so, can you talk about that a bit?
Jon Mays. It's a great industry. There's a bunch of great people. And, I think the classroom is all around us in our industry. We can learn from people that are ahead of us. We learn from the people that we're working with. I think Jeff Mosley, who started the company, has been a huge impact on my life because, like I said earlier, he gave me an opportunity and allowed me to grow into that opportunity and taught me along the way. And so I think he would be probably my biggest mentor in that. As a song lover and a guy that likes songs, I'm pretty smitten with the older songwriters and how they did it and how they stayed in it and how they weathered failures and successes and those Tom Douglas stories. Usually they're just perseverance stories. And, I think we learn a lot from other people saying, oh, it's hard for you too? Oh, cool. I'll keep doing this then, that kind of stuff.
I'm so glad you asked because I've got a little sermon about this that might take just a sec. But in my story, when I told you when I came to town, that band that I came to work for was signed to a label called Benson. That was being run by the last family member that owned the label, Bob Benson. Bob was an amazing guy. He left a legacy. A lot of that catalog, his fingerprints are on that. At the time, it was the largest label in town. He was warm. He was personal. He was the first adult I think I ever met that there was no line between his faith and his work and his family. And he was just a very integrated man. And he was a mentor because I caught a lot from him. He would get on the bus with us and do trips with us sometimes, and just so impressive of a guy. And he did invite me one time. He led a little Bible study for some young guys, and I went one time, and he led communion for these musician guys that was around. It was so impactful for me. That's the reason I left a good job at Sparrow Records to go to Benson, which was a failing kind of Titanic label, because in my mind, this was God's full circle, story for me, that I could go and return Benson to its glory days because I knew how Bob had kind of done things. One thing I regret in my story is that I think if I had walked up to Bob at any point and said, hey, could I go to lunch with you once a month? He would have been so happy to do that. But in my insecurity and just, fearfulness, I couldn't do it. He was the big record company president. I was a bass player. He'd never have time to do that. I'm sure he would have done that and probably would have gotten as much out of it as I would have. If you have any sense that there's that kind of person out there for you, press into it. And if they can't, if they don't have time, that's great. That said, I still caught a lot from a lot of people, and of course, a lot of reading, a lot of books, a lot of pastors that you could kind of say I was mentored by. But I really miss Bob and wish I would have spent more time with him.
It's great. Yeah. I have this, obviously I think we all can relate to this. I don't think we're meant to be on our own. We're meant to have people around us. We're meant to have community. And I feel like the mentor thing is such a huge part of, I think, how any of us survive what life brings our way. And so I'm a big proponent of, finding people around you to lock arms with, whether you're an artist or you're in some other kind of business. I wouldn't be here without the people that have been in my life that have shown me favor and loved me and encouraged me along the way. So I think probably I wouldn't be doing A&R without a lady named Susan Riley She's the one that gave me a chance, saw something in me. She's still a very sweet, dear friend. So Susan Riley, I wouldn't be in the position I'm in without a guy named Mark Bright. He's a producer and songwriter here in town, more in the country world. He was our leader for a couple of years, and I learned so much from him. He was from a little different world than the one I function in currently, and it was a lot of fun working under a producer as an A&R guy. And my third one would be my current boss, a guy named Rod Riley, and he's just such a wonderful leader, just a kind person. Probably those three would be my mentors over the last 15 years. So
Good.
Can I tell one more mentoring
Yeah,
story?
absolutely.
When I was at Word, and again, I had never been in a real corporate environment, never had a desk, real job kind of thing like that. And you guys remember Elwin Raymer? Elwin was a guy probably 10 years older than me or so. He was a publisher, funny, good guy, and we were going to lunch once a month. And Word had gone through a sale. It had been owned by ABC, and it sold to Thomas Nelson, who was a book publisher here in town. The day that Thomas Nelson people came over, and it was a very corporate, stodgy kind of, Thomas Nelson was not like a music company. And they all had suits on, and they met with the whole staff, and I happened to have lunch with Elwin that day. So that morning they'd come in, and the guys were like, hey, we've been looking at Word for a long time. We love Word. It's a good company, and you don't come in and change a good company. So we want to get you guys together and tell you we're excited, and we're not here to change a bunch of things. So I'm having lunch with Elwin just a few hours later. I'm saying, well, this is, it's kind of neat. This is what they came in and said. And Elwin goes, uh-oh. And I said, what? He goes, they're going to change some things. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, they kind of need to come in and tell you that because they need everybody to work while they figure out what they're going to do, who they're going to let go of and how they're going to restructure and all that. And I'm telling you guys, about 3 months later, absolutely, the heads started rolling. The top people were laid off, and they started restructuring things. And it just reminded me, sometimes just a guy like that who can kind of give you, this has been my experience. Here's a little yellow flag for you. When they say that, it probably means this. So that was a good one.
Yeah, phenomenal. Well, let's just open up to your guys' questions, because I'm sure you have them. So these guys are here to answer. Again, like John said, I'm going to piggyback on his thing. Have the courage to get up and ask the question, because they're here. These guys are here out of the goodness of their heart. Yeah, so go ahead.
Stop there.
Okay, all right, that's good. So, from your perspective, how does
What's
well?
sit down.
Oh man. From your perspective, how do you get a song to be in the rotation on a radio? Okay, and I'm sure you've gotten this before, but is it the label that can really help push that along, or do you guys have some kind of perspective on, somebody's making the decision to get a song play on airplay? So that's my question.
He looked at you.
He made eye contact. Direct eye contact.
Okay, so maybe 15 years ago, most of those decisions were made by the DJs themselves. And like if you listen to old Casey Kasem American Top 40 shows, which were so fun to listen to, you notice two things. One is a real variety of music, and two, a really quick moving chart. Like a song could be in the top 10, but have only been on the chart for 3 or 4. We all remember days when we could get 2 or 3 top 10 songs out of a record in a year. So mainstream stations started hiring consultants, and consultants would come in and say, you got 2 things wrong. You don't know who your listener is. You need to identify who that is. And then second, you need to find out what they want and play that for them. Well, Christian music didn't really adapt that until maybe a decade ago or so, but now Christian music follows that same pattern. So they have identified who that listener is. It's a white woman between 29 and 45-ish. She's personified in the industry as Becky. I don't know if you've ever heard who Becky is. It's worn out. But so what's different about Christian music is a lot of, I would say 90% of the stations are what are called listener supported, right? So Becky is probably paying a monthly support check to the station So it's very important for them to play what she wants to hear. So they have a couple of means of figuring that out. They'll do a lot of online research, posting songs, and people will go in and kind of vote on them. When they get really serious and can spend some money, they'll bring 100 Beckys into an auditorium, and they'll play sometimes 100 snippets of songs for them. And they're literally sitting there with a dial, and that dial is either being turned up or down. When there's no markers on it, but it's just down or up while that snippet is going by. And of course, that's all aggregated into a computer, ranked from 1 to 5, and they would never play anything less than a 4. So we're constantly talking about how songs test. I was telling some guys here last night at the dinner, it's a weird thing that this has really worked for radio. I mean, most Christian radio is doing really well. Last reporting period in the Nielsen's, Houston KSBJ was the 5th most listened to station in Houston, the 4th largest city in America. I mean, that's giant. But what has been really good for radio has kind of been bad for music. Because what we now deal with a lot, not on every song, but on the songs that we think can be singles, is will Becky like it? Will she say it tests well? Or will she test it well? And, there are some definite lane lines for those kinds of songs that she likes. If you listen to K-Love, their mantra, is positive and encouraging. So if it's not positive and encouraging, they're probably not going to play it. Well, you're sitting there going, there's a lot about my life as a believer that's not positive and encouraging. And in some ways, you have to say, well, you don't get to write about that stuff, at least for your radio singles. And that's incredibly limiting. Now, the positive side of that is the challenge of writing something for Becky that's new and fresh, and maybe it's just a new way of saying the same old thing. And so we're always kind of caught in that motivation of this song, it's been written about 15 times. Is there a way we could express this in a new way? And that's an artistic challenge, a creative challenge, I think. But it can be very besetting to believe so strongly in an artist and a song. We experience this almost every day. And for it to go to radio, and then for your radio guys to come back and say, well, it's not testing well. And they will tell you themselves, if we test it on a Monday, it can get different numbers on a Wednesday. It can get different numbers when it's cloudy. It can get different numbers in Minneapolis. It can, it's a poor science, but it is the science that they use. And so I would say there's still some, at least with some of the DJs and programmers that have been around for a while, they still use their gut, even in saying, I'm not even going to test that song. I don't think it's going to work for us. But mostly it's going by what Becky says she likes, and what she likes especially are the songs that are really familiar to her. So if you listen to K-Love for a couple of days, you're going to hear a lot of really old songs that you've heard a lot of times. And she wants to hear her favorite songs over and over again. That's kind of what they're bound to. So Steve and I were just talking today, we found out that K-Love has, currents are like new songs, right? So on a playlist, they really restrict their level of currents. And we were excited that K-Love was playing 21 currents in their playlist, which is still, you're kidding, only 21 new songs. Well, for this year, they've cut that down to 17 or 16, I think. So out of every song they're playing, only 16 of them do we even have a shot at getting in. And they've got a bunch of singles, we do, they do, every other label that's not up here. It's horrible. But we also, they keep the razor blades away from us. But the other weird side of this is these amazing stories that come back to us from, I heard this song on the radio, and my marriage was in a ditch, and I went and made it right, or the extreme one that we occasionally hear sometimes, I was considering taking my own life. I heard this song on the radio. God uses Christian radio not just to the believing community. I mean, even outside of that, it's amazing. So we want to be there. We want to be a part of it. But how the decision gets made to play what song is really frustrating to us.
I could have never answered it that well, so I think I learned some things.
I totally learned some things.
The only thing I would add to it would be that Becky is changing, so yeah, I feel like, a 25-year-old 10 years ago is now a 35-year-old, and that 25-year-old, that's a 35-year-old, listen to different music. So a 25-year-old, it's now a 35-year-old that would be Becky now, grew up on different kinds of music.
Sure.
Honestly, they grew up on hip-hop in the 90s. There was a lot of different styles that the 35-year-old 10 years ago didn't grow up on. So that's where I'm excited that I think our challenge is we have to keep pushing and finding stuff that, yes, it can kind of play ball in what Becky is, but we have to keep growing it because I believe we have to show people what they want to listen to. I don't want to be told what we're going to sign and what we're going to create. We need to find artists we believe in that can create something that maybe Becky doesn't know she likes. So it's a hard challenge, and it doesn't really go back to that specifically your answer, but I do think it's an adventure, and I think we are tapping on some new stuff.
We should take Becky to lunch. Ask her all these questions. Oh, those are good answers.
I will say to that end, just culturally, music is always, if the left side is progressive and the right side is conservative, it's always moving from the left to the right. Stuff that was in the middle of the lane 5 years ago, they wouldn't have, now is kind of old sounding. And stuff that's coming on now might be in the middle in 3 or 4 years. So there is some strategic decision-making about, can we land things more to the left, more aggressive, more young, heavier beats than Becky might think she likes right now. But the wind's blowing that direction, and we hope that we can land that.
But Becky likes hip hop, so
True. The other thing I was going to say is I think radio through the ages has been such a music discovery tool for most people, and that's changing. I think with what's going on and how people consume music and all the different providers of how you listen to music and streaming and all these, there are so many new ways for people to discover music that I believe over the next 5 or 10 years, I think we're going to see radio isn't what it is today. So, maybe I'm crazy, but that's my belief that I think people may not be listening to radio the same way they're listening to radio today. Middle of your console in your car, it may still have a radio station, but it has a Spotify, all these apps, and you have Spotify or whatever it is in there, and there's no CD player. I just think there's going to be other alternatives to just finding out about music through radio. So I think there will still be radio, but my hope is that it changes a little bit. And I think you're seeing even in a younger demographic that they aren't listening to radio, and they aren't buying CDs, and they aren't downloading music. They're finding music differently. So I think that's going to change who Becky is as that develops.
So obviously, you're in a room full of people willing to invest in what they want to be their career. What advice would you have for artists who are, obviously the internet is chock full of, hey, sign up for this thing. Like there's Sonic Bids, there's Reverb Nation, sign up for this and, submit this and you'll get this person's attention and that person's attention, which my level of discernment is that based on what you guys are saying, that ain't going to do anything. So what is your advice to artists? There's so much noise out there. So what's your advice to artists when it comes to things like that? They're willing to put all this money into things, that I feel like are just cash grabs. But how would you respond to that? And what advice would you have for artists?
Are you saying Seth is just a cash grab?
I feel like things that we can pay money for and learn are valuable. But hey,
right here.
now this is a college education for a couple dollars. It's not.
I think relationships are key. I think that's just the truth. And, I think, unfortunately, this is labor, what we all do. And it's hard and it's time consuming in its process. And there's not a lot of shortcuts. Some people do it faster, some people do it slower. But, I'd say everybody that's been doing this has been doing it for a while. And they've been getting better for a while. They've been developing relationships for a while. And they've been walking it out for a while. And so, I think that's typically the artists that we're attracted to anyways, not, hey, fresh off the boat and I can sing and I love God, but, I've been out here hustling and I've put out a couple EPs that have failed and I've gotten better because I learned from those. Learned what didn't work. I played out this many dates, and this is what worked, and this is what didn't work, and this church had me back, and this venue had me back, and they didn't have me back. Those kinds of things, and it's just building relationships. And can some of these online things do that? Maybe they can. But, I think from our lips, still it's nuts and bolts, human interaction, developing a relationship. And, I don't know about these guys, but I think most of the guys in town, if you're nice and you're kind and you connect with people in this town, they're not going to ignore you. At least once, at least get a coffee or have a meeting or, I can grab 15 minutes on the phone, those kinds of things. And, I think, like Jon said, work ethic of taking an inch and getting a couple more inches out of it in respectful ways, trying to figure out how to learn, apply, add value, just over and over again. You didn't ask this, but I don't think there's any easy way, to speed up the process. I think it's just nuts and bolts relationships building, which we all know relationships take time.
What you guys all are experiencing here at this is a team with a track record. It doesn't matter how much it costs. That's going to be valuable, life-changing experience for you. So most of that stuff, anybody can go online and set up a website and say, I'm here to consult you or whatever, and all these people are going to hear your stuff. But to the extent that you can, before you ever invest any money in that, see if you can find out who that is, and more importantly, what they've done. If there's no track record there, I wouldn't invest any money in it.
Because our generation is the DIY generation, we have access to distribution now via like TuneCore, advertising, Facebook. What would you pitch to like an independent artist who's already creating cash flow, who has a manager and a booking agent, they're making money, and you go, hey, we want to sign you, and they're like, well, why? Is it because we can get an international push for you, or like what's the benefits, I guess, is if someone's already working and proving themselves to you?
I think every scenario would be a little bit different depending on the artist and what they're coming in with. But typically it's relationships. I think most labels have relationships with people that are beneficial to you that you may not be able to get even with some of those relationships you do have. I think expertise. It depends on where you're at in the process of development. But whether it's an A&R expertise. Getting connected with experts as songwriters and producers. I think the value comes in relationships. And then beyond that, most labels invest a significant amount of money in trying to push something. So, we'll invest hundreds of thousands of dollars on trying to break an artist. So it's, there's the bank system to it as well, so.
Yeah, I think all that's very true, and I think it's together is better in some instances. That artist might not be right for our label or Word or Centricity, but my belief is that the right label can add a lot of value, whether it's a national presence or it's better songs or it's better connections to better writers. I think if everybody could do it on their own, they would, and it'd all be easy, but that's typically not the case. We all have our own skill sets and our expertise that we can all help add value, right? And that's the ideal. And so, if you're an indie artist, you may be fine making X amount of money a year and being a regional or semi-regional artist, or even having pockets across the country. At some point, when you want to compete on more of a national level, you do typically need more partnerships. And I think those partnerships are going to continue to evolve and change from what they look like right now. But I still think there's going to be national partners helping independent artists along, compete nationally, internationally, globally, all that kind of stuff.
Here's my Evernote note for reasons for signing. What can a label do for me that I can't do for myself? This is something I've established over the years of having this argument with people. And we should say sometimes you shouldn't sign. You might have a really great reason not to sign with anybody. If you have all those things you're talking about, God's done some pretty amazing things in your career and life, and maybe it's crazy for you to sign. But here's what I got. Funding. These guys mentioned this, like we do have money. You might have money too, but you might not want to spend it, or you might want to spend it on a house or something. Physical distribution. Believe it or not, we all have artists that still a fourth to a half of everything they sell is still from somebody walking in a store and buying a CD. I know that's hard to believe, but that's the case. And most artists can't get physical distribution into retail. A team, people around you that know more than you do, that can add to what you're doing through the belief they have in you, the experience, which kind of goes hand in hand, people who have been in front of you and can help you make decisions about things, relationships, we said, advice and counsel, which some people might laugh at. And then it's a larger platform. To take something from a regional level to a national to an international level is something really hard to do on your own.
What is something that as the industry changes, and like from what I've heard from you guys, you foresee a lot of change coming? What's something that we as the local artists, as the local worship leaders and stuff like that, what's something we can pray for you guys as your positions in the industry that, we can empower you guys? Because it seems like to me, there's a lot of artists that are like, what can you offer me? And a relationship isn't one way. So what's something that we can offer you in prayer and that we can really just bless you guys with?
I'll start. I think we lean heavily on wisdom. You could pray for us to have wisdom to make good decisions. We feel an appropriate weight of responsibility for some level of kingdom decision making. The music that goes out to most of the Christian community will come through us and the guys like us that work in A&R. None of us want to get to eternity and go, that was a stupid decision. We want to hear well done. We want to know that we've stewarded the responsibility well, and that requires a lot of guidance and wisdom that none of us have enough of. So we'd always pray for that.
Yeah, I mean, the word always comes to me is discernment. It's a very hard thing to know what's the right thing to do. And I constantly ask the Lord for vision as well of, what do you have for me? Should I keep doing this? Do you want me to do something else? So I try to keep a very open-handed conversation there. And I think the thing that's a struggle in any kind of career is just identity, not finding your identity in what you do. So that's a constant one for me.
Just amidst all the changes we talked about and where you reach people, I just pray the gospel continues to go forward wherever it needs to. I don't want us to have to only, like Josh said, exist in this place where the music all sounds just like this and it's being tested and it fits in the mold. And, I want to reach people that are younger than 25. I don't want to reach them when they get kids and turn on the radio that way. And, I want us to all be a part of continuing the gospel forward, even outside of the walls of the traditional CCM industry, whatever that looks like. And, whether it's worship, whether it's hip hop, whether that's rock, when rock decides to come back at some point, it's going to come. It'll just be patient. It'll come back. No, it's big because, I feel like we can talk about how, our industry gets relegated and gets smaller, or is it getting bigger? Is it getting smaller? I don't know. And, people left that and watching Game of Thrones now, and I just, hopefully they're not. But, that we would still play a role and these artists would still play a role in changing people's lives.
Yeah, I don't even hardly know those people yet, but we'll definitely be praying for you guys for that. But I think also there's a heavy importance in what you shared about, it's the stories of I could have taken my own life tonight, but I didn't. And ultimately, I think you guys in helping Christian music get promoted and out there, I think that's part of the power of your guys' relationship. So thank you from all the local artists too.
Thanks.
Yeah, good.
On the heels of your discussion about stewardship, as a father of a 14-year-old who wants to be an artist, and the pressure that you said that you feel about making sure that you're stewarding correctly, and as a father who may feel pressure to make sure that I'm stewarding her gift that God's given her correctly. If you were the father of a 14-year-old that wanted to be an artist, other than saying, don't do it, what advice would you give?
Oh, man. What a great question.
So we can't say don't do it?
We eliminate that.
I have a 5 and 7-year-old daughters, so I'm avoiding this question because I don't know if I have an answer for it. So I need to think about it a little bit more.
I'll just say, I think most of these roads are long roads again, and it's development. And I think, one of the tricky spots that we get into as labels intersecting artists is how do you develop an artist that you're not bound and determined to get out immediately in 6 months to a year. And so how do you serve an artist that's not coming out soon? I think you need to find those people wherever those relationships are, whether it's a label, whether it's a manager, whether it's a producer, writer, whoever that is that can help nurture that development, knowing that that's probably going to be a process. I don't believe that, that any of these roads are fast. That someone comes to town and says, oh my gosh, you've got career songs and the sound is dialed in and you've got a fan base and you've played X number of dates and you're ready to go. It just doesn't happen anymore. And now the stakes are so much higher to not mess it up that, you measure 4 times and cut once, on songs and development, production, writing and promo tours and all those things to try to hopefully make the testing happen. That one thing, that one initial spark. So I would say find people that are going to walk alongside you, maybe walk ahead, a little bit ahead at this point, and help lead that process of development. I don't know where she is at in development, but typically we intersect at a development point anyways, where there's still more work to be done. So,
Man, there's so much here. Some that we've already talked about. One is figuring out how you can trust, And I know I can speak for these guys as well. Anytime you're feeling alienated from the process as the parent, that's a yellow flag, especially with someone who's 14.
sure.
But I would say the most damaging aspect of this comes through celebrity. And faith and celebrity are just really weird things to combine, right? So, and celebrity we could call that Xandria standing on a platform in front of 15 kids, and she's looking down at them and they're looking up at her, and she's given a credit of spiritual maturity, leadership, and intelligence that she may not actually possess. Only you can determine and shepherd that, right? So I would say the gate you have to guard is celebrity, and knowing when she's ready for that, because there's so much she can do in music before that happens. I mean, she may be incredibly gifted. I've never heard of a thing she's done, but it may be God's sovereign destiny for her to be the biggest artist ever by the time she's 16. But in some ways, you're trying to figure out that path, right, and guard it for her. And at the same time, really watch that issue of celebrity, because I'm telling you, it is soul crushing. No one goes through this experience without it changing their lives, for the good or the bad. No one comes out the other end the same as when they came in because of celebrity. And it takes some maturity to learn how to handle that. And I know some pretty mature 14 and 15-year-olds, but you only know that for her, right? So I would, one, put a lot of weight on who I trust, and then put a lot of emphasis on guarding that celebrity issue as she learns to write music, perform music, record music, make relationships, go out and play and perform, all that stuff she can do without having to carry that weight. But if she does start to carry it, you may have to carry some of it for her and guard that without being a stage dad, and that's your own messiness and complication. Like he said, there's really no road for this, but I will say, I think you guys would back me up on this, check me if this isn't true, but there aren't very many good stories about young women. A lot of celebrity suddenly comes to them as young teenagers. Not very many good stories there. I was the same for guys. I mean, not very many. I mean, just think about them, you know. It's just a something that it takes some maturity to handle. And most teenagers don't have that kind of maturity. So go with that sort of advice or counsel if it's any of that, and stay on your knees as much as you can.
I couldn't agree with this. What John just said more. I've signed one thing that was kind of younger age, you know, middle teen, and it did fine for a few years, but quickly came to the realization that, you know, once they got into that older 18, 19, 20-year-old age bracket, they wanted to do something different. Musically, they wanted to do something different. So I would say from a developmental standpoint, whatever she wants to do now, 14, may change when she's 15 and change when she's 16. And, you know, I try not to sign someone really young. Well, I like to have some years of experience, and likely they're going to have more to say too. So one of the latest things I signed, he was in his mid-30s. So and he has a lifelong of wear and tear that he gets to talk about. So just a little encouragement that it will likely change whatever she is doing. She's going to develop and want to do something maybe different when she's 21. So having a sensitivity to that, I think is wise.
When I was at Benson, I signed a trio of 3 16-year-old girls, and I killed them all. They're dead today. But I totally swore I would never work with teenagers again. It's too complicated, it's too messy, and even the parents sometimes are too weird. I mean, you seem like that you would come up here and ask that question says so much good about you. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for your.
I would just kind of like to know maybe some of your favorite success stories that you've had with artists, and maybe during the unfolding of the success, like what was the surprise? Like what was the fun part about that whole process? So.
One for me that's pretty easy is worked with an artist named Laura Story. We connected, obviously a manager, you know, again, connected us. And I decided to go see her in Atlanta, and I never met her before. She'd written Indescribable. She had some stuff going on. She was in a band called Siler's Bald, played upright bass. There's things. So I went down. She was serving in her church, heard her leading worship, and I met her, and I felt like the Lord said, you need to work with this person. And that's really the kind of the only time that's ever happened to me, you know, doing this, kind of like that audible, like, I think that's what I heard. And we went to dinner, and she told me that her husband had just been diagnosed with a brain tumor, like literally right after that, 15 minutes later. And I'm like, I just heard something that doesn't line up with this. And she said, you know, we just prayed about it and felt like if you would have us, that we would go forward with this. And I said, I think this is right. I think we need to do this. And so then I had to go tell my boss and tell him the whole story about the brain tumor. And so, you know, he had surgery right after that, walked a very, very hard road for 9 months, and didn't think we were going to get the record out, didn't think he was going to make it. All of these things that happened that were hard and very, very hard, and hard to put out the record, hard to release the record. First record did fine, did okay. And some of those hardships carried over in the second record. It was hard to make another record. It took 9 months, and we turned this record in. And the last song was this piano vocal at the very last minute called Blessings. And she turned the song in and was like, man, that's a great song. We should call the record Blessings. That was my genius. And I love the song, but it was a piano vocal. And so, you know, those kind of don't fall into that's the hit. Yeah. And so, you know, we put... we had discussions about what was authentic for Laura. We put the song out, and it took on a life of its own, and really surprised us all. And that's my favorite story because those are the best stories. You know, the ones where God kind of breezed through this, and you know, hopefully I was obedient. Hopefully I was obedient in hearing the Lord say, "Work with Laura Story." Hopefully I was obedient in serving this artist through all of this stuff. I know she's been obedient through this because I walked with her through it, and you know, reached a point through a lot of heartache and a lot of sadness that God used this song for a lot of people to go, oh yeah, me too, I feel that same way. And the best part that it was really kind of a surprise that it took on this huge life of its own. So that's my favorite story.
This is a current one, but the Lauren Daigle's story is kind of fun because Centricity has this amazing gift of independent ownership. Family that owns Centricity lives in Seattle, and they have this kind of retreat home place that's been up there, and it's a few hours outside of Seattle. So we get to have retreats for indie artists every couple of years, and it's kind of turned into an A&R tool for us. We'll invite people up that are on our radar at one level or another, and it's small. It's only about 20 or 23 people, and because of the way the housing works, you kind of have to do the same amount of guys as girls, and bands are usually guys, and so you're always kind of moving those chess pieces around. Well, I'd invited a band from Baton Rouge called The Assembly, and they were coming, and another girl we had invited, her mother passed away, and she had to back out, obviously. So there was, on the second track of the Assembly record, there was a second verse sung by this girl, and it sounded good. And so I called them up, hey, who's the girl singing on that track? And oh, that's this girl, Lauren. She's going to LSU, and we lead worship with her sometime. And honestly, I had nobody else I could think of to invite. And would she want to come? And so they gave me her phone number, and I talked to her and her folks. And so she ends up coming to the retreat. That's all we knew about her. Never played a show, never written a song, sang that one verse. That was all she had ever recorded. Here's where it kind of gets funny. We start usually on a Friday night. We have Saturday, and then Sunday we all go to church together, eat lunch, and then Sunday afternoon, everybody gets up and plays a song, mainly because none of them know what the others really sound like, and they're all getting to know each other. And so on Saturday night, the lead singer for the Assembly, his appendix ruptures. So the closest hospital is like 70 miles. So they rush him to the hospital, and he's out for 4 days in the hospital. They didn't have to do surgery on him that night. So the rest of the guys in the band are like, well, fine, our one shot to play in front of a label, and we've lost our lead singer. So we're trying to come up with like, well, could you guys just do some worship songs, and maybe Lauren could sing with y'all? Okay. So that's exactly what they did. And Lauren opened her mouth, and all the jaws started dropping. So that's one sort of cool part of how we even heard Lauren in a way that we probably wouldn't have otherwise. Then secondly, after the retreat, everybody is kind of gathered from the staff, and we'll go over everybody that was there, and we're going to follow up with anybody and how. And the owners, and this just says something about the kind of people they are, occasionally over the years would say, well, we'd like to fund a little project or like an EP or something for so-and-so. They've done that with 2 or 3 different people. Nobody that we would sign, but they just love the person and want to help them, and that's kind of their heart. So we'd gone around the room. Everybody loved Lauren, sweet girl, good singer, nothing going on. I just described 5,000 people, So we all were leaving the room, and the Lumrys said, well, we'd love to do something for Lauren. Could we just do some recording on her? And in the back of my mind, I'm going, oh, fine. Now more work I've got to do. I love that these people are that way, but now I've got another thing I have to do. At the time, the guy working with me was a guy named Guy Zapka. And I'm like, hey, Guy, would you mind taking this on? And he said, just bring it to town, and we'll get some songs written. And Guy leaves. He goes to World Vision, and so it comes back to me. And sometimes the chemistry is just magic on things. And we hooked her up with a guy named Paul Mabry. And Paul and Lauren write this song. I don't think Lauren was very involved in the song, but How Can It Be comes in, and everything changed, because this song showed up. And I don't think Lauren even really loved it that much in the beginning, because it wasn't her song, and she had just kind of sung on it. But I love that no one in our company can really take credit for what happened with her, what's happening with her. Maybe the Lumleys, but that was more just that they just loved her and wanted to help her because she was going back to school. And I love that guy's appendix ruptured, and we never worked with him anymore. It's like him coming to the retreat cost him his appendix, and he got some good food out of it. That was about it. Can I tell one other quick story? This is more on a song than on an artist, but last year we have an artist named Johnny Diaz. He has a song called Breathe. We were looking for a single. We're going back to the Becky thing, We didn't have one. He sent me a couple of songs. One of them was Breathe. I don't know if you've heard it, but it is the anti-radio song because the chorus, most choruses need to blow up big, and be memorable and hooky. Well, this song went backwards. Goes to breathe, just piano, just breathe. So my response is, pretty great song, probably down the middle for the audience, but clearly not a single because the chorus goes backwards. Okay, so fast forward, my wife, actually Diane, who's our office manager, was kind of sitting around going, I like that Breathe song. Because we didn't have any kind of single. Well, it ended up getting single, and at some staff meeting, a few months later, our radio guys saying, you guys, this Breathe song, something crazy is going on, and it was like it broke some testing record. It was testing higher than anything or something. So right after that meeting, I went back and emailed Tony Wood, and Jonathan Smith were the writers, and the producer, a guy named Chad Copeland, and I just said, hey guys, just getting this story about Breathe, just want to make sure you know why this song is doing so well. Sheer A&R genius. So Johnny, who is very slow to respond, immediately hits back, copies everybody with my email, clearly not a single. So I'm like, Johnny, stay on topic. Sheer A&R genius. So maybe in a way that speaks to the truth that all of us know up here, nobody knows.
Right.
Nobody's got this figured out, and what artist is going to hit, what song is going to hit, we're all just trying our best to do the best work we can, but nobody has it figured out any more than anybody else.
It's fun to keep doing it, though.
Yeah, amen.
Keep trying.
No, you're fine. I'll do real quick just because I know we're running out of time here, and if anybody else has a question, I'll just kind of the same idea there of almost something slipping through the cracks. We had a band of two brothers. They're called For King Country. They were pursuing kind of a mainstream thing. We signed them when we had a CEO that came more from that world, and so the idea was, we're going to find a mainstream partner and take this there. And we just were hitting roadblock after roadblock and did showcases in LA and New York with our mainstream partners, and no one's interested. Our CEO was let go. They felt like they were just, it's over, it's done. There is, no one believes in us. What do we do? So the record was made. There wasn't really anything on there for radio, and so it was kind of this pivotal point of sitting down with him and saying, there's kind of two paths here. And it's either we kind of part ways and you guys, go figure something else out, or, maybe we work on some more music and see where this leads, and let's grow where we're planted. And so that was kind of a pivotal point in the relationship with For King Country, where they used to be called Joel and Luke. They weren't even called For King Country, and we made the decision on a December night that we were going to write a few more songs, one of those being Proof of Your Love, and change the name of the band and grow where we're planted. So we almost let one slip through the fingers as well.
That's pretty good. As we're wrapping up, I hope that, that was such a good point of none of us really know. I mean, we're all just walking through this together, trying to figure it out, trying to do the stuff that moves us, that we're passionate about, and that we think can move other people. So, man, thank you for the vulnerability and just the honesty. And like Chance said this morning, the greatness doesn't come from ability, it comes from vulnerability. And that's one thing I love about all three of these guys, having gotten to know them and do many records with them over the past few years. They're the best. Why don't we give a huge, huge hand for Jon Mays, James Rueger, and Doc Bailey. Yeah, there we go.
Hi, this is Seth Mosley. You've been listening to the Full Circle Music Show, the why of the music biz. If you haven't already done so, head over to FullCircleGoesLive.com to get on the waiting list for our upcoming Music Makers Bootcamp. Don't miss your spot. If you sign up there, you get priority access to the first tickets as soon as they become available. This show is produced by the Full Circle Music Company with editing help from Jericho Scroggins. We will see you on the next episode.